Hello, welcome to my video. Karen Creighton here. Today I thought I would introduce the fact that we have this amazing network of communication going on in our body all the time, 24/7, and it doesn't stop. It's so exciting, I feel, because once we know that things are happening in our body, it makes much more sense, I feel. So every living thing communicates. Trees communicate through vast underground fungal networks. Bees communicate through movement. Whales communicate through enormous distances in the ocean. And our bodies, they're communicating every second of every day. In fact, the more I've explored this subject, the more fascinating I've become by the idea that perhaps one of the most important things happening in our bodies isn't simply chemistry, it's communication. Communication is the key, I feel. And once we start looking at health from that perspective, some of the things we think we understand begin to look quite a lot different. And so, what do I mean by that? Is while you're listening to me, an extraordinary amount of communication is happening right inside you right now. Your brain is receiving information from your body. Your gut is sending messages to your brain. Your nervous system is continually sensing what is happening both inside you and in the environment around you. Your organs aren't sitting there independently doing their little jobs. They are part of an interconnected living system. And that system is continually responding and adapting. There are absolutely millions upon millions of messages. Some of those messages are chemical. Some of them are electrical. Hormones carry information through the bloodstream. Nerve impulses can transmit information incredibly quickly. Cells communicate with neighboring cells and distant tissues. Your immune system is constantly receiving information and responding to what it detects. Even your gut microbes interact with this wider signaling environment. There isn't one master conversation happening. There are countless conversations happening simultaneously. And somehow, when things are working well, the body coordinates all of this beautifully. So if we look at things simply, really, is what are symptoms that we're dealing with are just simply information that your body is trying to feed back to you. I really find this fascinating because we tend to look at things separately. So when we're tired, we look at something for fatigue. When we're gaining weight, we look for something as a weight loss solution. We've got digestive problems, aching joints, or brain fog. Each becomes another separate problem to solve. But what if we looked at some of these things totally and utterly differently? What if a symptom can also be information? Not something the body is doing to us, but something that may tell us that somewhere within this enormous interconnected system, something needs attention. That doesn't mean that every symptom has one simple cause. Mind you, it often can. Bodies can be far more complex than that, however. But it does change the question we ask ourselves. So I've been recently talking about one of these messengers, GLP-1, which is really in the news and things that people are grabbing towards. And I think this is a wonderful example of just how sophisticated the body's communication system really is. We hear so much about the GLP-1 medications, and it's easy to forget that GLP-1 is actually a hormone our bodies produce, particularly in the gut after we eat. It's a messenger. It's one of the signals involving in telling the brain that food has arrived. It influences appetite and satiety and slows stomach emptying and helps coordinate insulin secretion when glucose levels rise. But GLP-1 isn't having that conversation alone. There is an entire network of messengers constantly telling your brain about your nutritional state, your energy reserves, and what's happening in the environment around you. And sitting right in the middle of much of this conversation is an absolutely tiny but mighty, incredibly important area of the brain called the hypothalamus. You could think of it as the body's great information processing center. It receives and integrates signals relating to hunger, energy, availability, stress, temperature, sleep, blood pressure, and many other aspects of our internal environment. And this is where leptin becomes particularly interesting for anyone struggling with their weight. Leptin is produced predominantly by our fat cells. As our stored energy increases, circulating leptin generally increases too. That leptin signal reaches the brain, including areas of the hypothalamus, and essentially contributes information about how much stored energy, call that fat, is available. Under normal circumstances, that information actually helps regulate appetite and energy expenditure. So you might imagine that someone carrying a lot of body fat would have plenty of leptin and therefore wouldn't be hungry. But it doesn't work like that. People with obesity or extra weight have high circulating leptin, yet the brain doesn't respond to that signal as effectively. And that is called leptin resistance. You've probably heard of it. So once again, the issue isn't necessarily that the body has failed to send a message. The message may be there, but the response to that message has changed. And I think that is a very important distinction. Then we have insulin. Most people think of insulin simply as the hormone that controls blood glucose. But insulin is also part of the body's wider energy signaling network. The brain receives information from insulin too, and insulin and leptin signaling interact with hypothalamic pathways involved in hunger and energy balance. And then, of course, there's cortisol. Cortisol, as you know, is one of our essential stress hormones. We absolutely need it. It helps us mobilize energy, influences blood glucose, and follows a natural daily rhythm that helps us wake up and respond to the demands of life. The problem isn't that cortisol is bad. The problem can arise when our stress systems are repeatedly activated and our normal rhythms become disrupted. This is what we call chronic stress. And chronic stress and poor sleep can influence appetite, food choices, glucose regulation, and other metabolic pathways. Cortisol also interacts with brain circuits involved in stress and energy regulation. So if we look now at the conversation that's happening, your gut is signaling, your fat tissue is signaling, your pancreas is signaling, your adrenal glands are producing hormones involved in the stress response, and your nervous system is continually gathering information. And the brain, including the mighty hypothalamus, is integrating many of those signals and adjusting behavior and physiology accordingly. GLP-1, leptin, insulin, cortisol. None of them work alone. And this is why I think reducing weight And management is simply eat less and move more misses an important part of the biology. Hunger isn't just willpower. Satiety isn't just willpower. Energy regulation isn't just willpower. There is an extraordinary biological conversation taking place underneath all of it. And I feel one of the most useful questions we can begin to ask isn't simply, how do I suppress my appetite? But how can I support the systems that regulate appetite, energy, and metabolism in the first place? Because when we start supporting the health of the whole body, weight will only be part of what begins to change. Because communication can be influenced. Chronic stress changes signaling throughout the whole body. Sleep deprivation affects hormones, appetite regulation, glucose metabolism, and the nervous system. Inflammatory processes alter cellular communication. Nutrition provides many of the raw materials that the body needs for normal physiology. I'll just put a little bit in there. As for example, if you don't have enough magnesium, there's a whole gamut of things that cannot work properly. If we look at digestion, if we don't have enough magnesium, we don't make as many digestive enzymes. If we don't make as many digestive enzymes, we are not digesting and utilizing the nutrition in our food or our supplements. So consequently, we can be eating the best food, we can be taking the best supplements, but most of it won't be absorbed. So consequently, we need to address the root causes of these nutritional deficiencies. And I always look at minerals, minerals, minerals. But anyway, I digress. But that's just a sort of one of the things that we really look at. And when we look at our physiology, our environment continually gives us, our nervous system, information about whether we are safe, threatened, relaxed, or under pressure. None of these exist in isolation. That's why I increasingly find it difficult to talk about weight without talking about stress, to talk about digestion without talking about the nervous system, or hormones without talking about nutrition and metabolic health. Everything affects everything else. So we have a network hiding in plain sight, which I'm becoming increasingly fascinated by, and that's the fascia. For a long time, fascia was often described rather simply as the connective tissue that wrapped around muscles and organs. But fascia is far more interesting than wrapping paper. It's continuous connective tissue network found throughout the body. It surrounds and connects muscles, organs, nerves, blood vessels, and it's richly supplied with sensory nerve endings. It responds to movement, mechanical forces, and changes within its environment. And once you begin to look at the fascia as a body-wide network, another piece of our communication begins to appear. And this is why I will be talking about this next time. So if we look at everything being connected, because you can't draw a neat line and say, this is where the nervous system stops and the fascia begins, or this is where the gut ends and the brain takes over. These systems interact. Structure becomes function. Movement affects signaling. Stress affects physiology. Nutrition affects the materials available to build and maintain tissues. The nervous system influences digestion, circulation, and immune activity. Our body is not a collection of separate departments. It's one living, adapting, communicating organism. And I really think we've lost something important by becoming so focused on treating individual parts. So perhaps we need a different question. So perhaps next time your body gives you a symptom, there are two questions worth asking. Of course, what is causing this? But also, and this is what I'm really passionate about, is what is my body trying to tell me? Because perhaps supporting health isn't always about fighting against the body. It may be, I find always, it's about reducing the things that interfere with normal physiology and give the body what it needs to communicate, regulate, and adapt. And this is where our next conversation gets particularly interested. And as I said, we're going to look much closely at the fascia, the extraordinary network hiding in plain sight throughout your entire body. And I have a feeling that once you see it, you'll never quite look at your body in the same way again. See you next time. Bye for now.